This conference will now be recorded.
All right, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janice Bredman, and I am president of the Columbus ARMA chapter. Welcome to our October meeting. And as we all know, we're still doing virtual. So I am, I think we're used to this and accustomed to this now. Hopefully, eventually we will be able to go back to our meetings in person at our restaurant that we work or are accustomed to going to. But anyway, without any further ado, I am going to turn my mic over to Perry Smith, who will introduce our speaker, Chris Stenson. So Perry, you can go ahead and proceed with the introduction.
Thanks, Jan, and it's so wonderful to see so many people here this afternoon. I am excited to introduce our speaker, Chris Stenson. He is the State Records Manager for the Oregon State Archives. I've worked with Chris for a number of years through other professional associations. I've had the opportunity to hear him speak on numerous occasions. I always get something out of Chris's presentations, and he puts so much energy into them. So I'm really happy to have him here today. In his work for the Oregon State Archives, he works with state and local government agencies to proactively manage their electronic records securely and efficiently. When he presents, he likes to focus on topics surrounding technology and electronic records, and he's a strong advocate for a proactive approach to records management and archives, and helping others get past their own technological and administrative hurdles. Prior to joining the Oregon State Archives, he worked as the electronic records archivist for the Illinois State Archives. He's been an active member of the Council of State Archivists Electronic Records Initiative, has served on NAGARA's Digital Rights Management Working Group, and contributed to the report. He has a master's degree in library science from Indiana University and an MA in history from Washington State University. Chris, you're well traveled. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Chris.
Thank you, Perry. You left out the big part is I'm also on the board at NAGARA, so I usually give a lot of props to them. Okay, let me see, what things do I need to hide from all you folks so you can't steal all my trade secrets? Let's see, I always forget which one. I've got multiple monitors here, so we'll see which one is going to show up. Okay, we'll see which one when I go to presentation, what this is going to work. While I'm getting my stuff set up here, let me make sure this works. I really love it if, okay, so you guys can see my presentation now?
We're seeing a blue screen.
Just a blue screen? It hasn't
just
swapped
blue.
Out yet? That's not good. Hang on, let me change share something else. Yeah, let me see here. What do we got going on here? Sorry, I don't use WebEx a whole lot, so the controls are just slightly different than the ones I'm usually using. I'll figure it out. While I'm fiddling around here and pretending I know what I'm doing, would people be so kind as to, in the chat box there, can you go ahead and type in briefly your name and what kind of government entity you work for, or what kind of entity? I guess it's not all government, huh? So what kind of entity you work for? I'm just curious to see who's in the audience today. Also, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we now see it. Getting comfortable with discomfort is showing up.
Cool. Okay. Yes. So anyways, yeah, please, just thank you. Just throw in your stuff there, because it's always interesting to me to know who it is I'm talking to, so I can attempt to address, things that might be of interest to you guys. Let's see here. Oh, got a nice variety. It was funny. I told my boss the other day, I'm gonna be presenting for the for a ARMA chapter in Ohio, and she just looked at me like, what? How did that happen? But we have a smallish community, so I actually sort of cut my teeth in the field in the Midwest. I'm from the Northwest originally, so my roots are from Washington and Oregon, but I found myself on a 7-year detour when I went back to grad school and then got a job in Illinois. So I have more than a passing familiarity with it. I used to do stuff with Midwest Archivist Conference, and that's how I started getting involved with COSA and then eventually NAGARA as well. So so this presentation I'm going to give here is basically the same. It's a little different than the one I gave as a part of a NAGARA webinar back in, I think it was March. And the whole idea for this sort of this presentation is that I don't know that I always have unique insight to offer in the world of, traditional records management technique. I think there's a lot of very smart people out there with lots of experience. And while I think I'm among them, I think there's many others as well. I don't think that's necessarily a unique thing for me to talk about. However, what I do think we as a field sometimes lacks in is in the ability or the comfort, using our buzzword today, the comfort with advocating for ourselves with other groups, with interfacing with other types of experience and professions, of valuing ourselves as equal to them. I think sometimes we suffer from a bit of an inferiority complex combined with a bit of a scholarly arrogance that can cop in one, like they just don't do the work. And so I think it's a combination that can sort of do us a disservice. So part of what I do is I kind of come with a variety of these types of presentations where we talk about where are we at and what would really help us to move things forward, right? So that's hence I came up with the name, Getting Comfortable with Discomfort. Things are not always going to fit exactly how we want them to, and how do we move forward? How do we actually make progress? I'm using the term ARM. Obviously, we all know there's loads of different lingo, buzzwords about what are we considering here. I'm using ARM as the inclusive sort of archives and records management as two sides of the same whole. You can insert your own term here. If you want to talk about information governance, great. If you want to talk about life cycle management, cool as well. But I like to use this sort of inclusive term to talk about all different aspects of it. So today's talk will include sweeping generalizations, pop science, daily affirmations, advice gleaned from the mean trenches of cutting-edge electronic records management, and more. I don't take myself too seriously, so don't. Some of this stuff there will be some dad jokes probably. Some dated references, I'm good at those. For folks that recall, that's Mr. Know-It-All from Rocky and Bullwinkle. So I like to say we are smart people. We know we're smart people. We do a hard job. It's technical, it's complicated. It involves a lot of working with people that don't understand what we do. We tend to have highly specialized knowledge, right? What we have is a bit of an arcane science that we have spent years of our lives dedicated to. We do really critical work, and we are vital. Now, so I realize in some of these cases, some of you are from private firms, and I realize that belatedly as I have terms for good government. Honestly, it's good for good governance, but insert your own here. Good records management is critical across this field here. So there's probably going to be some government references in here, and I'm sorry I failed to generalize those. But we serve as a vital cog in the operation of any organization. In government, we secure rights and responsibilities. We ensure accountability. Within private sector, it ensures accountability as well, quite frankly. It ensures that things can run efficiently and smoothly, that information that is critical to the ongoing success of an organization is not lost. Also, good records management, we know, also helps limit the risk and liability associated with managing information that can be sensitive or dangerous to have, frankly, after a time. So we know this. We do, however, sometimes have blind spots, and this is something I've observed a lot over the years. We tend to overestimate how much others understand about what we do. I think this is common with a lot of professions where you've spent a lot of time amongst your own kind and doing this thing, is that we have a tendency to sort of assume, oh yeah, this is a basic thing. I learned this my first year in grad school, or I learned this years ago on the job. We know this, right? Well, sometimes that's not always the case, and we have a tendency to overestimate that. We have, as is also common with people in highly specialized professions, we have a frequent failure to communicate effectively, right? It's the old joke about the IT guy, right, that comes in and he just starts rattling off some stuff that nobody understands, and it frustrates everybody involved. Well, we kind of do this as well. We have our own lingo. We talk about retention schedules and archives and various senses, and we talk about metadata, and we talk about, you know, various types of schema. And what does that mean to any of these people? Nothing in a lot of cases. We also have a tendency to fall back on the old saw, they just need to follow the rules, right? Everything would work great if they would just do what we told them to do. And unfortunately, that doesn't always acknowledge the reality of life. I'm getting a little bit of like keyboard noise or something, so I think somebody might not be muted. And if you'd be so kind as to mute yourselves, that would be helpful. Thank you. And you can always chime in if you do have a question or whatever. Don't feel like you need to hold off. You can ask me. Thank you very much. So that whole we just need to follow the rules. I've run across this a lot, especially with, say, veteran city recorders. We have a city recorders here in, I think, Illinois. They were called city clerks. Same difference, right? But folks that have been doing it a long time, they know their stuff better than anybody else. And there was a lot of this kind of digging in their heels, and they just have to follow the rules. And without the acknowledgement, then guess what, guys? They're just not going to. We can't browbeat them with these things any longer. It's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. It's reminded of when I get in a clash of wills with my 7-year-old daughter, and she's very stubborn. And there's no winning, right? Direct confrontation will not win because she will burn it all down to win the argument. So we have to find a smarter way. Oop, did I click on something else? Must have. There we go. So what about when we really don't know, right? We have a tendency to be in a situation where we get asked questions all the time, and then we want to answer those questions, right? We don't want to leave people hanging. So what are our natural reactions when you're asked a question that you're not quite sure about? Well, a lot of times we talk about what we do know, right? We shift the subject slightly to a thing we feel more comfortable talking about. I used to joke about this when I was doing my MA in history. I said I always liked essay tests, and people in other fields who did a lot of multiple choice or whatever would be baffled by this. I said, no, listen, a multiple choice test tests you on what you don't know, right? It's kind of just a big game of gotcha. Whereas, hey, an essay test gives you the opportunity to talk about what you do know and try to obfuscate the stuff you don't. But this is a natural reaction. We tend to focus on what we do know and try to kind of like hammer things back into that area. Another thing we might do is we keep quiet, we pretend we understand, right? You find yourself at a meeting and you're like, oh boy, I'm out of my depth. And you just nod along and you pretend you know because you don't want to be the person that's asking that question. What do you mean by that? Sometimes this can turn a little ugly and we say we write it off as outside our area. We don't need to do this. This is the thing I run across all the time when folks tell me, I'm just not good with computers. I'm just not good with technology. I just don't understand them. To me, that's always been a bit of a cop-out. And the same would go with anything, right? Is this a tool that can help you do your job? Yes. So just saying, oh, I'm not good with that is kind of a lazy way out. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude, but sometimes I'm a little bit, Perry knows this. The reality is, quite bluntly, this is a cop-out. This is, I'm giving myself permission to not try. It's a thing you run across with people of all ages, backgrounds, and everything else, right? My daughter, little kids do it, adults do it. This is hard. I don't think I really need to know this, therefore I'm not going to try. And then I can say I can't do it. And if I say I can't do it, then I'm off the hook. So this is also a problem though, because we don't learn, we don't grow, we aren't as productive as we can be when we write things off. You may not be as good at something as somebody else is. You may never be as good. You may never be a natural at it, but we can always learn. We can also get frustrated and treat the task as impossible, right? This is the anger part. We're just like, forget this. This is dumb. It's not in my area. You can't do this. You're asking me to do something that's completely impossible, rather than finding out what it is that is possible within that. So what are some positive alternatives to these natural reactions? And none of these things are inherently bad. It's just the way we tend to react as human beings. So positive alternatives. Well, we can lend our expertise for what we do have, but don't try to change the subject, right? Don't try to completely avoid it. Don't be afraid to say, can you explain that term? It is a very powerful thing to be the one person in the meeting that goes, excuse me, for those of you that work in government, you know this, boy, do we love our acronyms. Every agency has 55 different groups within them with a bunch of different acronyms. I'm working with agencies, they come in with a schedule, and the schedule is just littered with these 5 or 6 letter acronyms. I haven't the foggiest what they mean. And never be afraid to say that, because oftentimes if you're in a meeting, you aren't the only one who doesn't know. Or, you know what happens, they go, oh, I'm sorry, we always assume people know that. Of course you don't. they feel embarrassed. You flip it on them, honestly. You're no longer the embarrassed one. They are, because they assumed these things and they should know better. And people are usually really cool about this. I've never once had anybody like snap at me because I'm like, hold up, what does that mean? Or can you explain this terminology for me? Maybe it's not an acronym. Can you explain what you mean by that? Because usually afterwards, I mean, I'm not going to pretend it happens every time, but I have had situations where afterwards somebody said, hey, I'm glad you asked that question because I had the same question and I was afraid to ask. So it's good to be that person, right? And it shows you as a proactive, inquisitive person. It makes people want to talk to you. You know what people love? Answering questions. People love it when you ask them things. It makes them feel smart. So this helps put them at ease. You do want to also ask focus and clear questions. Use every meeting you're in as a learning opportunity. Focus in on an aspect that you're curious about, or can you elaborate what you mean by that topic? Or when you said this term, are you referring to this or this? This helps you gain greater understanding and perhaps helps them understand more of where you're coming from. So this is a really, this is a positive way to spin your own lack of complete knowledge, right? What are we in a meeting for? We're not there to simply say things we already know, right? Then it's pointless. Then there's no reason for the meeting. I think we've all been in meetings where everybody's just talking about stuff we already know. I have not a whole lot of patience for those sort of meetings. So like, is this meeting serving a purpose? And it should be to share information that somebody in the room doesn't know, right? Okay, the power of a question. So I waffled about what I should use for my silly graphic here. I don't know if folks remember in the late 90s, especially late night infomercials, this guy was always on the TV spouting stuff about government grants and everything else. Anyways, it was a dumb picture. I decided to use it. So the power of a question, right? So I just realized it's probably cutting off the very bottom of my screen so you can't see the phrase at the bottom. The power of a question. Questions are powerful. You can really find out, not only can you find out information, but you can actually make a statement by the sort of question you ask. So things that I've never had happen when I asked a question. I've never once lost respect in the eyes of peers or other professionals. I've never been mocked for my ignorance. We're all adults here. I've never been passed over for promotion because I asked questions. Quite the alternative, actually. And I've never had my reputation ruined. I think we all understand these in our inside, but this is kind of the emotional reactions we can have. We can think about these things and say, you know, often we will be concerned about these things, like little voice in the back of your head sort of stuff, right? Also, the little asterisk there, and I think the screen is probably chopping it off slightly, but it says discounting childhood and adolescence because let's face it, kids are monsters. So yes, obviously, when you're a kid, people do all those things because kids are terrible. But once we become functioning adults, we hope to move past these things. And I really hope you work with functioning adults. Things that have happened when I asked a question. Well, the most basic thing, I've usually learned something I didn't previously know. And boy, is that handy, because that is, after all, the point. I have gotten more information to formulate a better response to a problem, right? I know A, B, and C, but I don't know D or E. Maybe I could find those out, and then I have a more complete set of data to work with, right? I have gotten quiet thank yous from other people after the meeting. Like I mentioned that before, this has happened. And it allows me to be a real fallible human. Give yourself the ability to not be perfect, right? We talk about this a lot these days. I know we talk about living remotely, working at home. My daughter is doing school downstairs. My wife is working in another office in here. We're fortunate, and most of us have these jobs we can do, but a lot of people don't. My team, we are all dealing with our own stresses and everything else. We can be human, and this is kind of the give grace is a very popular term right now. But in general, just allow yourself to not be perfect. Allow yourself to say, you know what, I don't know about this. Let me ask. Again, it's good. It's good. It's healthy. It cracks down those barriers. And sometimes when we've had to fight really hard to get where we're at, and we've really had to fight to be respected at what we do. And I think obviously some folks find themselves in situations where their position is not as respected, right? Or they come from a more challenging location, or the background of the organization they're in doesn't really support what they do very well. It can be tempting to sort of just get your hackles up and really very defensive about everything and try to show yourself as perfect all the time. I'm a believer that being honest about things will gain you more respect and will get you further than trying to pretend the alternative, because usually people can see through it. So not knowing everything is okay. most important tool is trust, right? Once people trust you, once people enter the departments, once people up the chain and down the chain trust you, they will actually work with you more. Trust is crucial. Trust comes from honesty. If you are constantly blowing smoke, if you are constantly exaggerating what it is you can do, if you are constantly pretending things are fine when they aren't, you lose trust, because people know that. People know things aren't right. And the more you talk about it, the more you blow smoke at them, the less they trust you. Beware the person who has all the answers. Boy, I never trust anybody that claims something is miraculous or something is just amazing or it's going to work great, it's going to be perfect for you. That's not true. So a little backstory here. I've spent a lot of my time since I came back to Oregon overseeing the operation of a large statewide electronic records management program. It is unique within the country. We now have almost 80, 90, something in that range, local and state government entities that we work with, providing essentially software support, analysis, helping them file organize and all these things. It's a very aggressive project. The last thing I want to do when folks sign on for this, or when I'm talking to folks about if they want to try this, the last thing I've always wanted to do is claim it's going to be great, it's going to be magical, it's all going to work, it's going to auto do all these things, because it won't. I tell everybody, this will be work. You get out of it what you put into it. And you know what happens? They don't get false expectations. And yeah, maybe it means 1 or 2 agencies don't sign on, and I'm okay with that. Because what has happened, I came into the project after we had had some folks in the past overpromise. They had claimed it would do all these things. They had oversold it, right? And so I was then put in the uncomfortable situation of having some very disgruntled people saying, listen, we were promised all this stuff and it never happened. This doesn't work this way. And I had to walk all that stuff back. It took me years. But from that foundation, we have built a much stronger foundation of trust, of honesty, of openness, of talking to people about how, listen, I'm not here to take away your work. I'm here to make your work a little bit easier, to make it more efficient, and to help you do more work with less resources. I'm not here to say you don't have to work anymore, right? So that's important. Never trust anybody with all the answers. The same thing goes for patent medicines or cleanses or government, right? If somebody claims they can fix everything and just listen to them, they are selling you something. So it comes off as arrogant, fair or not. You may not mean to be arrogant, but if you're trying to convince people too hard, if you're trying to calm them down by promising them the world, you come off as pretty arrogant. Like, look at this guy, he thinks he's better than me, all right? Use others' expertise. You are not an island. You have people around you. Use people that you know that are better at things. You have a team for a reason. Or if you don't have a team, make one with people from other groups, right? I want a group with various skills, because having us all be redundant is kind of pointless, right? I have people that I'm happy to say, you know what? Amadeep, she's one of my top tech people. Amadeep knows exactly what she's doing with this stuff. I can do it pretty well, but she's better than I am, and she's quicker at it, right? I know my most veteran staff member, he's been here twice as long as I have. He knows things about the history of these schedules. I will be quick to go, hey, Matt, what do you think about this? Because I don't really know yet. I haven't learned that part. That is important. Okay. So having said this, what can we do? Having said, okay, we're going to use a diverse team of people. We're going to help lean on others' expertise. We need to focus on our own strengths, all right? So after I just got done basically talking everybody down and saying, hey, you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to know everything, but we also, the flip side of that is know that we do know a lot. We do have a lot of knowledge, and we need to respect that for ourselves and show other people that that is worthy of respect. You can't be an expert on everything, but neither can they, right? So they need you, and think about what you bring to the table that is unique and valuable. So why do I have pictures of basketball players on here? So I think about these as sort of an emblem of this, because basketball is a game of positions, right? Less than it used to be, but still fairly distinctive. So in terms of, you have, okay, for those of you who may not be big sports people, so you have a center, a power forward, a small forward, a shooting guard, and a point guard. Details aren't necessary, but they're all different sizes. They have different skills available to them. Pictured up here, we have Stephen Curry, who is one of the best shooters, if not the best shooter in NBA history. He's small by NBA standards. He's about 6'1", smaller than I am. He is a preternatural shooter and an amazing ball handler. You know what he's not good at? Blocking shots. And why is that? Because he's 6'1". On the right, you have Dikembe Mutombo, one of the best defensive players in NBA history. He was a center. He's about 7'2", right? Not an amazing shooter, not the quickest guy on the floor, not someone you would want to rely on for his handles. But you know what he's really good at? Blocking shots. Blocking shots, defensive rebounds, the sort of work he needs to do. You wouldn't want a team made up entirely of Dikembe Mutombo, nor would you want a team made up entirely of Steph Curry. Having said this, I do realize the analogy breaks down, because if you had a team of entirely Steph Curry, you could probably just shoot the other team out of the court and it wouldn't matter. Nonetheless, stick with me here. So the idea is that you have diverse teams. That's how you assemble a good team. In sports or in work, we find people that have unique skills that can complement the others. There's also something that is a piece of, this is where the pop science comes in a little bit. So I went through a year-long program last year called Leadership Oregon. It's this really fantastic program where they take managers and emerging leaders in the state, and we do workshops all year long, 2 days a month, about various aspects of leadership, of teamwork, of cooperation and communication. It's fantastic. Anyways, one of the speakers we learned from talked a lot about strengths and weaknesses. How do we, and what do we tend to do, right? Using the basketball analogy, because it's easy, think about Shaquille O'Neal. I think most people, even that aren't into basketball, understand who Shaquille O'Neal is, right? One of the best centers in NBA history, 6-7 feet or so, big, huge guy, over 300 something pounds. Always a bad free throw shooter, right? Could never seem to crack above 50% free throw shooting. And people would look at it and go, why can't you just practice that? Just practice those free throws. And you know what? Year after year, around 50%. He was never going to get better at free throw shooting. So what was his best aspect? What would be good? So the conventional wisdom might be to spend all his time practicing free throw shooting. But you know what? He was never going to be even a good or even an adequate free throw shooter. So why would he spend all that time focusing on his absolute weakest asset that he wasn't well suited for? Why not work on strengthening what he's already good at to make him transcendent in those areas, right? So the same thing. Here's an example. This philosophy says basically that our weaknesses tend to be when we overuse our strengths, right? So here's an example. I am a very high energy person. I think out loud. I think fast. I can come off as aggressive or dominant sometimes when I don't mean to, because I am out there, I'm throwing things around, right? So if I overuse my skill, right? So it's very good for leadership. It's very good for decisive meetings, right? It's very good for presenting. I'm pretty good at this stuff. However, when overused, when I go too far in this direction, what can it do? It can dominate a room. It can suck all the air out of it. It can hold others back from contributing because they think I don't want to know. It can make me look arrogant and presumptive, right? So that is an overused strength. So that is something that we have to be aware of, and we have to know when to use it. But also, we have to strengthen our strengths. We focus on in the areas where they come in handy, like things like this. What should I spend my time doing? Should I work my, certainly I have to be aware of it, but quiet introspection and things like that are never going to be my best strength, no matter how much I work on them, right? So it's something I have to be aware of, but I should also know that my area that I really bring to it are the skills I already have, and I need to strengthen those. I need to sharpen that knife further. So this is sort of how do you fit in the puzzle, right? What are your best strengths? What can you really offer? And really focus on that. Because you can practice the IT stuff all day long and you'll never be as good as the IT people, right? So don't try to be the IT person, try to be what you are. Going along with this, you can't do it alone, okay? So these are some hypothetical questions here, right? So do you have administrative clout? Do you have advanced network engineering and security skills? Do you have in-depth legal knowledge and extensive training expertise? Do you have control of and access to the best tech tools? You may be able to answer yes to 1 or 2 or even 3 of these things, but almost never will you be able to answer all of them, right? Top-level administrators are generally speaking not legal experts, or they're not top-level network engineers or information security experts, right? The best tech people are rarely the best trainers. They are rarely the legal scholars. The lawyers are rarely as good at computers as the others are, right? So we all have different skills. You need people around you. And you say, but Chris, I don't have people. I am on my own. And this I say, okay, but there are people. They just may not be in your unit. So how to make friends and influence people is kind of one of those cultural tropes. I think it was a book, right? It predates my era, honestly, but it was a joke even when I was a kid, I think. I want to say it came out in what, 70s or something? I don't know. Somebody could probably correct me on that, but I'm not going to look it up. So I feel like it was a joke in old cartoons a lot. You'd see somebody reading this book as like I don't know, as like a touchstone or something. Okay. So one thing, how do you make friends? How do you broaden your team, right? How do you broaden your team? Well, never miss an opportunity to connect to new partners, right? If you are invited to participate in a movie with other in a meeting with other folks, say sure, why not? If you meet a new group of folks from work, virtually these days, but you know what I mean, talk to them, ask them what they do, introduce yourself and what you do, offer to help them with something if you think they might need it. New employees that come on board within your organization, great time to get it on the ground floor. They don't know yet that you're powerless. Quick, try to convince them of something else. I've done that lots of times, right? Oh, hey, we've got a new deputy CIO. Ooh, I am going to cozy up to him right away. And it's not nefarious. It's just, hey, I'm going to make myself useful to this guy so that as he gets the ropes, he knows that I'm a person that can help. Lead with the giving, right? This is a problem sometimes when you are in a cash-strapped department that you're always trying to figure out how to get what you need. I need these resources. I need this. It can be hard to flip that. I'm always trying to get agencies to do a better job of their schedules, to update things, to adopt better electronic records management practices, right? So I want them to do better records retention. But what do they need? They need business efficiency. They need risk management. They need security. Okay, I'm going to lead with that. I'm going to give those things to them. And how do I do that? By twisting records management on its head and showing what you can offer, right? Hey, I would like to help you be more efficient as a business. You know what the result of that is? Hey, we get rid of all those file cabinets full of paper. Hey, we get rid of a lot of unnecessary redundancy. Hey, they're now within a secure system that I can control and apply retention to. They got their business efficiency. I got the records management on the back end, right? So give first and you will benefit. Not to mention just offering to help out. Just offering advice on, hey, we got this new scanner. We're not really sure what we should set it at. All right. Hey, you might not be an expert, but you know who isn't? Who also isn't? Almost anybody else in the agency. And you could talk to somebody else in the field and they could say, oh yeah, this is one of the standards we use, right? Lean on your compatriots. So give first and you will benefit. Know that we are an often misunderstood field, right? Educate folks on what we do, but do so kindly. Do not ask, thank you. Oh, wow, I was way off. 1936 on how to win friends and influence people. Beautiful. Well, that would probably explain why I think I recall seeing it in a bunch of old 1950s era Hanna-Barbera, or not Hanna-Barbera, but Warner Brothers cartoons and the like. Thank you, Barbara. Real-time fact checking. I dig it. We are often a misunderstood field, right? We're a specialist field with not that many people. Nobody knows what a records manager is. People don't really know what an archivist is, and that is arguably a much better known term, I would say. I almost always, people say, oh, what do you do? And I sort of say what I do and they go, oh, okay. They give me the nod and the smile, which means I haven't the foggiest what you're talking about, right? And that's okay. So we educate kindly, right? We put it in terms they understand. I talk about, so an example, you know, remember this thing, and unfortunately there's more than your fair share of public examples of bad records management. And usually I could use that as a, hey, do you remember that story that came out a couple years ago about the governor doing this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And they go, yeah, I'm like, well, listen. What he didn't do was these things, and that's what I do. So these are something we work to educate once we've made these friends. Get involved in technology discussions. And then you might say again, but Chris, I don't know anything about technology. I'm like, great, you don't have to. What you do have to know is what needs to be done to preserve a record or manage a record, right? We know records depend upon, you know, authenticity and security and access control and all these good things, right? All these different aspects of it. We know this. Well, guess what? Those things still have to apply to any technology that might touch record information. So get involved in those technology discussions. Find a way into them. Just ask, hey, can I sit in on this meeting? I'm curious as to what you guys are up to. I'd like to learn more. Once you're in that meeting, you can find an opportunity when appropriate to say, so just curious, what kind of data will be passing through this system? Will there be formalized forms? Will it be a relational database? And you don't have to use the term record, but think about these things. Then you might say, so according to our legal requirements, we may need to consider this, or we may want to talk about this. Currently, I've been working on this for many years, and as often is the case with government agencies, we all just jumped into Microsoft Office 365 and Teams, really once the pandemic hit, right? Because suddenly we were planning on the rollout later this year, and then suddenly it was like it was there and we needed it now. But I was brought in on the group for the agency that was sort of steering it, and so I'm able to have conversations about what we need to do in terms of structure, how people need to use it in order to make sure we are compliant. Furthermore, that conversation, because our agency was a pilot agency, I was then able to worm my way up the chain, and now I'm also advising on the statewide implementation team about how this needs to be rolled out in other agencies. This is not something that happened accidentally or all at once. I've been working on this sort of stuff for years. I've been at the Oregon State Archives now for about 5 years, and it's taken a good chunk of that time to gain the trust of people in different agencies, making friends, understanding who the folks are, meeting folks, offering to help agencies, just doing tons and tons of training, right? Getting our voice out there. So now I'm involved. People call me. It's glorious. I love it. Nothing better than when I get a cold call from an agency I've never spoken to before. And they're asking me a question because they heard my name from somebody who had seen one of my things, right? That's exactly the game we're getting at. So get involved in these discussions, but this is a long process, right? Because we need, shadow meetings, right? I just asked to show up. Say, hey, I don't need to contribute. I'm just curious, right? Take notes, ask questions, and contribute when appropriate, right? Don't butt in and try to overtake somebody's meeting. Do not do that. Trust me. I've had other colleagues in the past that had a more direct approach, and it didn't win them a lot of friends suddenly, because they'd be like the bull in the china shop. They'd show up in a meeting and then start shouting about how this wasn't going to work and you couldn't do that, blah, blah, blah. Not the way to get what you want. So it's all about sort of these kind of working your way in gradually. Okay. So that was kind of the daily affirmation section and pop science. Now I'd like to talk about a few different groups of people. Maybe you yourself are included within one of these groups, and if so, awesome. You already know, and maybe you can help your colleagues in the field that aren't. So I'm going to talk about a few different groups of people and some of the key aspects of how to communicate with them. Right? I make no. I'm not pretending to be the foremost expert in this area. This is out of observation largely, but I think a lot of these things will hold true. So administrators, right? Nothing happens without the administrators. So what's going to influence them? What's going to be important to them? Well, first of all, they're concerned with the fit within the agency mission and governance, right? So how is your program and what you do work within the agency mission and governance? What does that mean you need to do? You need to know what the agency mission is first, and you need to identify what the governance structure is, right? This is information, homework you need to do first. They're concerned about policy discussions, right? How does the operation run? Sometimes HR is involved in this, sometimes it's admin, same sides of the same, two sides of the same coin, really. Policy discussions, though, how are we supposed to operate? They're concerned with return on investment, right? Now, what that means is going to be different from the type of organization you're in, of course. Return on investment in a government context means doing more with what we have, serving more citizens, et cetera. If you work in a private company, that may be producing more widgets for less money. You know how that goes. If you work at a law firm, that may be winning more cases, spending less time doing research, whatever the case may be, right? So return on investment. They're concerned about this. How can you help with that? They want brief and focused. I think we've all heard this, right? It's the old elevator speech thing. Do not give them the long-winded technical details. They don't care. They don't want them. Talk about the broad aspects. Talk about how it's going to work, and then get hooked up with one of their deputies to do the detail work, right? Ease their burden. They got too much to do. They don't have time for it. They've squeezed you in for 20 minutes on an alternating Thursday because that's the only time you can get, right? Make best use of it. Ease their burden. Say, hey, what can I take off your plate? Or offer, listen, I can take care of this. Let me take care of this. Let me draft this first thing for you, and then you can see what you think. You know, it's a lot easier than coming up with something from scratch, editing something after the fact. So if you can do that part for them, boy, are they going to love you. So the IT team, right? A field in which we are ever more intertwined, right? This is inescapable. We have to work very closely with IT, and they can be an adversary, they can be a roadblock, or they can be our best friends. because they have a lot of influence behind the scenes. First of all, remember they're people, not adversaries. It can be tempting to see these folks as just the folks that are there when your computer breaks, or the folks that keep monkeying with the network and making you not be able to access it, or whatever else, right? But they have a job and they're people. They tend to take a lot of abuse from folks as well, I would note. I think about any of you have ever worked a help desk job or a call center job. I have when I was younger. Oh gosh, do you take a lot of abuse for stuff that is not your fault, right? Don't be that person ever. Do not be the person that wants to take a video, do not be a person that somebody wants to take a video of because you're being so unreasonable, right? Don't be that person. They speak a different language and we're not always sure what that is, right? It is confusing. There's lots of lingo. They assume you know it and you don't. There's my graphical interlay for the moment. Okay. Be clear about what your needs, right? So you know what they're not interested in? The high level narrative, the sort of stuff that you gave to the administrators. IT guys don't care. I'm sorry, I'm using the term IT guys. That's a gender term I shouldn't use. I'm breaking myself up. Anyways, IT folks do not care about the overarching narrative. They don't care why you need to do it necessarily. They need to know the technical specs. What does success look like? This is actually a great question that was asked of me by a higher up in one of the IT help desks in our state. And I thought it was really good, and I just retained that in my head. He just said, what does success look like? And that really was good because it showed me, it stopped me from trying to give them the narrative or whatever. It just said, okay, here's what we're trying to get, right? Here's the destination. Don't try to dictate the ABC to them. Just tell them, I need to get to C. What are our options, right? Let them fill in the details based upon what's available. Again, talk objectives, not backstory or reasoning. They don't care. Objectives, what are you trying to get to? They're technical, folks. Be technical. And provide information when requested. Don't overload them with it, but when they ask, hey, I need details on this and this, give it to them. Make sure they have what they need, right? Again, with the minimum amount of backstory. Again, this is another one of those ask questions and learn, sit in on meetings. You may find yourself, you can often sit in on these things. They may let you say, hey, I'd like to be more part of this group. Can I sit in on these things? And you might find most of these meetings are terribly boring. I have sometimes, but also some of them are really insightful. And it's great to be there. And over time, you know what? You actually make friends with some of these people. You develop relationships, personal relationships with these people. And next thing you know, you can actually chime in and you can talk to them and you casually have other conversations with them. And that's important. Again, this is how you make inroads. Don't forget to encourage them and compliment them to their superiors. Again, remember I said these folks take a lot of abuse. You know what they don't get a ton of? Compliments. Never be shy about lavishing praise on somebody who's done a great job, who has really helped you, who went above and beyond to their supervisor. Let them know. Let them know that person's doing a great job. You want to encourage, this is, you can think of it selfishly. You want to encourage the good behavior, right? It's like training a dog. Encourage it by just lavishing attention on them. Because you may think it's a little much sometimes to constantly email their boss about how great they're doing, but you know what? They probably don't hear it as much as they should. Also encourage them. Say, hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Great job. Have a good day. I'll talk to you later or whatever, right? Don't be shy about that. And this is something I have to train myself on because I'll admit, I have a somewhat, I don't like to have extraneous conversation as much as I talk. I don't like to have a whole bunch of like the gushing thank yous back and forth in emails, right? Nothing drives me nuts than when there's a string and then there's like 5 thank yous back and forth. I find it superfluous. I find it pointless. I dislike exclamation points. I think they're dumb. These are just personal opinions, right? I think they're overused. I think they're meaningless. I don't trust people that overpraise, that are constantly, and so caution you there, right? Don't throw praise on people for, putting the toilet seat down, so to speak. But do compliment them for actual work done well. But I train myself on this, right? I have to remind myself, no, people need affirmation, Chris. And I, as a manager, I have to do this with my staff as well. I have to remind myself, make sure you give them credit publicly. It's not that I don't appreciate them or I won't say thank you to their face, but sometimes I have to be reminded, I need to make sure other people know this as well, because it's good for the team morale. It's good for them. It's just something that doesn't come naturally. It's not that I don't love my people or really, respect's the wrong word, my brain just kind of blanked there. Appreciate. I don't appreciate them. Of course I do. It's just that I don't naturally lavish praise on things, right? And when I do, it means something. But that's just different, right? Different communication styles. So I try to be better about that. Okay, legal counsel. I see at least one of you from a law firm, so I probably don't need to talk to you about this because you spend your whole day talking to lawyers. I'm just looking back at our little list here. Oop, and there's a bank. Yep, you got lawyers there too. Lots of them. Yeah, all sorts of types. And of course, those of you in government agencies, we're no shortage of those. So legal counsel, yet another group that has very distinctive concerns and needs, right? So know your part of records law well, because you know what they're going to ask you for every time? Citations. They want to know the statute, the administrative rule. What is your power coming from to even ask this, right? They care about that. They want to know, do you have the authority to request this? Can we do this, right? Do your homework. Look up stuff about the case ahead of time. They do like details, not technical details, but the legal details, right? The framework, the administrative details. Focus on legal compliance and risk management, right? Those are the critical components that they are usually concerned with, right? We need to do this because that is the law. Now, this is not a good argument with other groups. If you just say we have to do this because it's the law, it's a separated from them, right? They're like, yeah, well, that's on my bosses or that's on the agency. That's not on me, right? Lawyers, however, they know it's important. That's their trigger point. So use it there, not elsewhere, please. Focus on legal compliance. Focus on risk management, right? It is dangerous for us as an organization. It is a liability for us to leave this stuff lying around. We are going to get sued. We're going to have our pants suit off, or we're going to have a massive information request that's going to freeze us in our tracks, right? Talk about liability. Talk about defensible disposition. They get that. That is something they understand. So really, ironclad rules here, right? Okay, so not knowing exactly what the platform was going to look like today, I decided to leave this in here anyways. So do we have like little, I wonder in the chat, do we have any sort of like little raise hand function or anything like that? Perry, do we have a raise hand or something?
No, this is Mark. No, we don't have a raise hand function because we're not doing it's not the
That's a meeting on a webinar. All right. Well, how about we'll do this. Use the chat box and just put in if you feel you have a good working relationship with your administration, that's A. IT, that's I, or L, or I guess L looks like I. How about you put LE? Thank you. So put in an A, an IT, or an LE to indicate you have good relationship with one or more of those groups, please. All right, in the chat box, just those letters with apostrophes as case may be. And I hope to see some here. And if none, boy, I'm glad we're doing this today. Oh, good. A lot of, yeah. Cool. It's always a little tricky when especially when we're doing these remote webinars to encourage, back and forth, because it's all so kind of stilted and awkward. In-person presentations are easier that way, but I like throwing something like that. So good. See, it looks like, okay, so a good broad thing here. And for those of you who don't feel you're there, hey, take a note of people that have that relationship there. These are your compatriots. Talk to them. Ask them how they got to where they're at. Maybe this is a good follow-up conversation, he says, as he tries to hijack your next meeting's agenda. But yeah, maybe this would be a good topic for you to discuss. How have you made inroads in these groups? Where did you start from and where did you get to, right? Not that there's a magic bullet, but this is how we can help each other out, right? Oop, gotta get back to my other screen here. Okay. So there is common ground between us and these other groups, right? That we should be thinking about. It's often a terminology mismatch. So lingo, right? We say records retention. They say records discovery. This is kind of on a legal front, but these are some general terms that different groups say, right? Records discovery may be what they're concerned about. We're concerned about records retention, right? Two sides of the same coin. We talk about disposition. They talk about risk management and business efficiency, right? We talk about, hey, we need to get rid of these records because that's what the schedules say. That's what we've done this for. They're concerned, different groups might be concerned with how does this affect our business, right? Okay, so we talk about then, over retaining this stuff is bad for efficiency. We have a bunch of extra stuff we have to sit through. It takes a lot of time. We talk about risk management. Having these things around is a liability. Some of it's protected information. It opens up our risk were we to have a data breach, all that sort of stuff, right? Authenticity of records is a term that we like to use. They talk about information security, right? Where information security ensures authenticity of records. So this is something we might want to focus on. This is an inroad in with information security. Listen, we want to protect the authenticity of these records. We want to make sure they are secure wherever they live. We talk about preservation of records over time. They talk about legal compliance and legacy building. So depending on the kind of entity you're in, some of these may be more or less relevant. But legal compliance obviously is always there. But legacy building is not to be underestimated. I think this is more actually in private entities, right? Archives within their agencies often exist to show the building of legacy, a history of the company, what they've accomplished. In government context, this shows the history of the government, right? This shows where we came from. This often, if you're working with political leaders, this is legacy building, right? This shows what they did while they were serving the people, or not serving people, depending on the politician. Nonetheless, we talk about metadata. Well, guess what? So do they, because metadata is metadata. But what we do have to discuss is what that means sometimes, right? The tech folks understand it immediately, but your other groups don't. So with metadata, I like to just simply, I use the piece of paper example. I say metadata has always existed. It's just we didn't call it that. So I hold up a piece of paper or something that has some things on it. I say, listen, there's certain aspects about this paper that are help us understand it. It's on 8.5 by 11. It's white. It has black and blue ink on it. It has certain pieces of information on it. All of these things are little bits of information that could be called metadata. They all give it context, right? So I use that analogy a lot when I'm describing it. And I say, now you take this thing and you shove it in the computer, it's lost all those inherent characteristics. So we have to describe them. Either the system generates it by all the background information that tells you what it was made in and how big the file is and all that good stuff. But also that it also exists in the metadata we apply around it that says this is related to the Johnson case. And this has, this is currently on a legal hold. These are pieces of metadata, right? So that's just a way I often use to kind of introduce that one. So what do I do if I still just don't get it? Chris, you've said a lot of interesting things here, but I'm a long ways from having these discussions so far. Sometimes you won't get it. Sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes where you start from and where the person you're trying to communicate are just too far away, right? You're just completely not in that world. You haven't the foggiest. Well, guess what? There are people in between the two of you. Figure out who those are, right? Find team members of yours or theirs that can help bridge the gap. Right? If that person is way into their own thing, if they're an information architect and they are so far beyond you in terms of understanding that, I find myself in that world sometimes. And you're like, listen, I just want to talk about the records and they want to talk about hierarchies and information structure. And I really don't grasp what they're getting at here. So find people in between you, right? Find people from the help desk that can help work you through it. Find resources that will allow you to get to them. Also, don't be shy about looking up things on Wikipedia. You'd be surprised how, maybe you wouldn't be, how detailed the tech and IT related sort of stuff on Wikipedia is. Because of course, a lot of people that do Wikipedia have a tendency to spend a lot of time on computers. Funny. Yeah, so it's educate yourself, but also find the people in there. Also, so who do you know that might have these skills, right? You may not be the person that has to do this. You may find somebody else that's already got the in, and it's okay with that. So those people there, we want those people. Okay, getting towards the end here. The stage is set. You've done your groundwork. Now, after helping people, after figuring out the lingo, after sitting in all these meetings, now you can ask for what you need. Utilize the project management framework if your entity has one, right? So we have a specific process whereby new projects get approved within our agency. If you try to go around that process, if you try to supersede that process, it is going to ruffle some feathers. It will often not get you what you want at all. Or if you do, you're going to tick off a lot of people in the process. If you have the clout to go over somebody's head within the PMO framework, sorry, that's Project Management Office. If you have the clout to go around them, don't, unless you absolutely had to because of some emergency. Because the process exists for a reason. Working within that framework, however much it may seem like a pain in the butt for you, will show that you respect them in their field, and they will in turn give you respect. Stay grounded in reality. Don't have unreasonable expectations. Don't set deadlines that you can't enforce, right? You can encourage, but do not try to control the process. Just understanding, don't be unrealistic or demanding. It's the old phrase, right? Your poor planning does not constitute an emergency on their part. Don't come running at them at the last minute and say, I need this tomorrow. That is not realistic. It's not their fault that you didn't plan ahead, right? And don't be that person. Be flexible. Flexibility is important. Things will change. Have a goal in mind, but don't fight battles over every single step, right? Allow things to be flexible. Work with the resources you have. Compromise when you need to. Maybe you don't get 100% of what you want right away, but maybe you can get 60% of it. That's good enough for the start, right? And you can work towards the rest later. Be prepared for delays. This stuff is complicated. Government especially moves slow. Private sector maybe not quite as slow, but nonetheless, be prepared for delays. Other people have voices too. Other people have competing priorities. Sometimes something, I've had these things that I've been working on for months and suddenly it gets dropped because servers crashed or we had a data breach or something else. They don't have time for me right now. And you have to understand that, right? Your issue is not a flood they're dealing with right now. That flood is, and they'll deal with that. And then you reintroduce the subject once that thing is over, right? No is just a starting point. Unlike what I tell my daughter, which is no means no. In this case, when you come in there and say, I need this, and they say, no, we can't do that. Sometimes what they're saying is, they're not saying this is impossible. They're saying what you just said is not something we could do. That doesn't fit into our thing. And this is the old allowing them to dictate the alternatives, right? Allowing them to set the path based upon what they can do. So then say, what would you suggest as an alternative? How can we get there? Okay, we can't get there. And this is why I try to avoid telling people how to walk the path, right? I say where we're trying to get to. Especially with the tech folks, this is important because sometimes what will happen is if you say, hey, I need to do this, and they'll just say, no, we can't do that. Because they're very literal in that, right? If it's a very literal response, you don't want to then go, well, if you have to, and then it turns into a fight, right? You're not going to win that because what you understand is in this case, no, we can't do that very specific thing you just asked for. So now you say, how else might we accomplish this? Here's what I'm trying to do. Can you help me find a way given what we are allowed to do, right? And you'll get a lot further with that. So alternatives, right? What would you suggest as an alternative? And that's it. That's my spiel. A lot of info, a lot of stuff, not a lot of content, a lot of talking, but it's what I do. So questions, thoughts, concerns, threats, whatever. What you got?
Hey, Chris, while people are typing their questions or coming up with their questions, I first want to say thank you for this. And I've heard you do this one a couple times, and it's always good for me to hear because there are parts of what you've said that I'm really good at, and there are parts that I am not so good at, and I'm still working on. So I really appreciate that. And I am one of those people who tends to overshare when I finally get the ear of somebody, especially in IT, overshare or maybe push the legality so much that could be off-putting. So I always appreciate it. Are there other questions? Either unmute or type in the chat.
This is Deb Veronkov. I just wanted to say this was an excellent presentation. I really took a lot from it.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot to mention praise also works. You can also praise. Thank you for nobody for commenting on my really organized office here. It was the exercise room before.
All right.
Well, just to let folks know, I will provide these the slides I'll get them to Perry, and she can get them to the group. My contact information is there for anybody who would like to talk to me about stuff. I'm available for you whenever you need me. Keeping in mind that I'm 3 hours different from you timing wise, so time somewhat limited. But yeah, feel free to shoot me an email or give me a buzz if you have questions about something. I try to help. We're a big community. Excuse me. What I mean is that we're a well-distributed community, but we're not that big. So it's important that we talk amongst each other as much as possible. So.
All right. Thanks, Chris. And we look forward to everyone else attending our next meeting. Please look at the armacolumbus.org site for the upcoming sessions. We'll let everyone go, and the meeting will continue for the board. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Chris. I'm glad to see everybody on.